Hey everyone, here we are in chapter 3 with supply and demand. This is the stuff that makes economics famous, I think, right? This is the stuff that everybody associates with the first classes in econ. So we will start, as many classes, many instructors do, thinking about demand. And so I have this question, what happens when people buy something? Well, I suggest that two things come together: a willingness to buy the good, that is, somebody values it more than the money they're giving up for it, right? They're willing to trade voluntarily for it, and they have the resources, right? They're able to pay for it. So when you buy something, you're both willing and able, right, to purchase the good. And so in a classroom, what I usually do is auction something off. And I'll, let's say, bring into class in the morning a hot coffee and a donut. I'll say, all right, how many people in the room, are willing and able to pay 25 cents for the coffee and the donut? And maybe in a larger class, maybe you can find, 20 people who are willing to do that. And I say, all right, well, what if we raise the price to 50 cents? Now all of a sudden, maybe there are only 14 people who are willing to pay 50 cents. And what if we raise the price to $1? I say, how many of you are willing and able to pay $1? And, then hands go down or people sit down depending on how we, indicate their willingness. And maybe at $1, there are only 9 people. And then we raise it to $2 and maybe all of a sudden it drops to 5. And at $3, there's only 2 people remaining. And you get up to $4 and there's just one person left, and then I sell it to them. Okay? And so what have I done? Well, I've basically made a list of prices, and then I've said how many of you, right? What's the quantity that people would want to buy at that price? So what we've really done is connected price and quantity demanded. And what we see in that little classroom experiment, and pretty much everywhere else, is that as the price goes up, right? So in this column right here, as you go down, price is going up. And as the price goes up, right, the number of people who are willing to purchase it is actually falling, right? So as the price goes up, the quantity people want to buy goes down. It bugs me. Let's make sure we have all the loops to make it say buy. There we go. The quantity that people want to buy actually declines. And so what we find is that there's an inverse relationship between price and then the quantity that people are willing to buy, what we're going to call quantity demanded. So an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. And that is so universal, right? That happens in the data that I, might collect in an actual physical class. And it happens in just about every other situation where people are deciding how much to buy at different prices. And we are so confident that this happens, right, all the time, or so much of the time, that we call it the law of demand. And the law of demand says that as you lower the price of a good, people want to buy more of it. And so there's this inverse relationship between, the price of a good and the quantity people are willing to buy. And of course, we have to say also all else constant, or in Latin, ceteris paribus, cateris paribus. I'm not a Latin scholar. Some people say that's the correct pronunciation. I don't care if you remember it in Latin or you just remember it in English, but part of the law of demand is, yes, we're concentrating on price and the quantity demanded, but then we're going to hold everything else constant. In the next video, we'll start to allow those other things to move and see what happens. But with the law of demand, we're looking at just these two variables, right? We said that last week, in the previous unit, that when thinking about models, right, that we're going to try to simplify away, make some assumptions to simplify a complex reality. And that's exactly what we're doing here. Right? We concentrate on just two variables, price and quantity demanded. So if we see this inverse relationship, as the price goes down, people want to buy more, or conversely, if the price goes up, people want to buy less. holding everything else constant. We see that happens with just about everything, right? The most interesting man in the world says, when the price of something falls, I decide to consume more of it. Now, there's a couple different ways we can relate this. One is the demand schedule, and that's what I had drawn before, right? When I was collecting data and I had all these different prices and the corresponding quantities demanded, in a table format, that is a demand schedule. Now, if you take that same data and you present it graphically on a two-dimensional graph where you plot price on the vertical axis and quantity on the horizontal axis, and you could take the exact data that I had that I made up back here, right, from 25 cents to $4, from 20 to 1. So I'm not going to plot it exactly, but at a price of $4, right, only one person was willing to buy, and at a price of 25 cents, I think I said 20 people were willing, right? And so then if you plotted those other points in here, and then you were to connect it, you might get something that looks like that. And we call that the demand curve. All right, so the demand curve is the graphical presentation of the data. Presentation, I can't spell. Right, the demand schedule, that's the tabular presentation, right? That's when you make it into a table. Now, demand curve is going to be downward sloping, right? Inverse relationship. So let's put that up here. Inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. That means downward sloping demand curve. Right? Now, that doesn't dictate the exact shape, right? The demand curve, right, always labeled origin, price, and quantity. It could be a straight line. It could be convex. It could be concave. It could be flat. It could be steep, right? But from left to right, it should fall, right? That's what the inverse relationship suggests, right? It should be downward sloping, but the actual shape of it, there's room for a lot of different presentations depending on the nature of the demand relationship you're talking about. Now, in its simplest form, for what we will draw a lot of, ours will just look probably like a straight line. Right? A linear demand curve is fairly easy to work with, and it's a good starting point, but just recognize that in the real world, it's not always a straight line. It might be flatter, it might be steeper, it might curve, it might be increasing or decreasing at different points. All of that is fair game, but it still should be generally downward sloping. So, in a nutshell, there you have it. That is the demand curve. Our next project, right, the next thing to think about is, where we said we have to hold all else constant. What if those things start to move? How does that affect the demand curve? We'll look at factors that shift the demand curve. But in an effort to break this into manageable chunks, we'll stop here and pick up with that in the next video.